So just want to give you a nice warm welcome. And I thought of this time as going more into the principles of the Alexander technique and or using them for the themes that we had last week, which was the almighty powerful pelvis and how it's oriented with the spine and the what we call the up thought, or the torso lengthening and widening and following the balance, following the movement of the head. Okay, so that was the first class that I taught, and then the second one was on walking. So if you want to do any kind of question or review of those, that's great. And then the one thing that I would like to do, well, two things. I'd like to kind of get us in the body and really, kind of quieting down our system and being able to really just feel that ease and beautiful experience of being embodied within ourselves at the end of the day. Most of us, it's the end of the day. We've already had our work day today. And, we can feel things like fatigue or an exacerbated condition of our own habits, which is our tension habits. So it's an opportunity to just come back to ourselves, with ourselves. And then the other thing I wanted to do is something that doesn't exactly happen with walking, but it's very much connected to the use of the pelvis width. So it's a little bit more aligned with the first class I taught, if you were in that class. And we're going to talk about the support that we have in the body as we go from standing to sitting or from sitting to standing. And that's what we call the position of mechanical advantage. Alexander called it the position of mechanical advantage. Our little, toy name for it is monkey, to be able to put ourselves in or notice that, bring more awareness to that position of mechanical advantage. So those are the two things that I thought we would, go into in a little more depth today, and then leave some time at the end for questions. If you have any confusions about what we do today, or anything really about, how you're perceiving the Alexander technique, this is an opportunity to, to go a little bit more into that too. Okay, so make yourself comfortable on your chair, but I'm going to ask you to come to the front of your chair. And there's a reason for that. We want to release the thighs as much as possible from the chair. When you're in the middle of the chair or the back of the chair, about half of your leg, half of your thigh is stuck. And I think I said this in one of my classes, but there's always a tug of war between the legs and the torso when we're sitting, and the legs always win. Why do they win? Because they get tight and the upper body doesn't know what to do. So it usually collapses, or sometimes people will do the opposite. They'll throw their spine forward and kind of throw their shoulders back and get really shortened and very tightened in the back of the back, in the back part of the back. And we want a real harmony between the front and the back of the body. So the first thing I'm going to ask you to do is just put your hands kind of in the solar plexus area, at the back of your hand, in the back, pretty high. It's a little bit above your lumbar spine, so it's getting closer to the, sorry, I just wanted to show you, so I stood up. So I want you to put your hands there and just breathe in and out a few times. Just feeling the breath coming in. You should feel a little movement in the ribs area. And why is it? And you can take your hands away now and put them on your lap. The reason why you want to feel movement is that right before you breathe in, if you went to Amy's breath class, she demonstrated it, but the diaphragm is actually moving down when you inhale. And it allows for more room for the air to come into the lungs. But then as soon as it's completely filled with air, then it starts to relax. So it's more passive moment is the coming back up at the during the exhale and at the end of the exhale. So it's pushing, it's active when it goes down. It's going down through that volume of your body, and then it displaces your colon, your guts, right? They move out. And that's what you should be feeling when you're just resting. Unless you're tightening and holding on to your abs, which you should not be doing when you're sitting. Yeah, there's a real misnomer also in thinking that we need to tighten our core or organize our core when we're sitting and standing, and that's literally not true. Your body is designed to be completely available, but I think of it as like a toning. So you've got this feeling of lengthening up and out, and that's actually the direction of release. Bonnie, did you have a question?
No, I was just fooling with my screen. Thank you.
Okay, all right. So that's what you want to keep in mind when you're sitting. So if you want to, you can close your eyes or keep your eyes open. Either one is fine as we begin here. But the first thing I'm going to ask you to do is bring the palms of your hand to the side of your neck and your baby fingers up behind your jaw. And you're really in the sides of the neck and a little bit in the front of the neck, but in the sides and the front of the neck. And just take a breath in that place.
Please, I can hear it even with the music on. Thank you.
And breathe in and out a few times and just bring your hands back. I tend to have, when we're on Zoom, have you put your own hands on, because you know, the Alexander technique is a hands-on, very light touch technique. It really helps to have the hands on. But if we're on Zoom, you don't have anybody helping you. So now we're going to bring one hand on the top of the head and the other hand to the back of the neck. And then just very gently, nod your head. It's almost like you could even put your hand on the bridge of the nose and kind of nod your nose down and up a few times. That's what we're looking for the head balance. It's a very easy, balanced arrangement between the head and the spine. And then taking your hands back down for a rest again. Next, I want you to think about the balance points of the bottom of the pelvis. And those balance points are, we call them the sitting bones as the pet name, but they're the very bottom little bones of your pelvis. If you're sitting too far back, you're more on your tailbone, but that rocks the pelvis down and collapses the front of the spine. So we want to be up at least in the middle of those little rockers and even slightly in the front. And then when you put your hand on your lower back, you'll feel a little bit of a curve coming into your lower back. You want that curve. That's the middle of you. This part of you is your lumbar spine. It's the biggest vertebrae right in the center of your body. So they're really supportive of you when you're sitting. And by the way, sitting is not so easy. And especially going from sitting to standing and standing to sitting. That's why I wanted to go into monkey today, the position of mechanical advantage. So we have this beautiful long spine within its curves, and you've got the top curve that goes a little bit forward. You have the lumbar curve in the lower back, and then you have the sitting bones on the chair. The next thing that we're going to do is put the hands on the thighs very close to the hip joints. And we're just going to slide our hands down the legs towards the knees, giving yourself that direction. And you can think in yourself, my legs are releasing away from my hips to my knees. And when you're sitting, you don't want to pull your legs in. You want to release the legs, the femur bones, away to the knees. And then You can feel down your shins a little ways. You could probably go all the way down to your feet if you wanted to, but having that feeling of the feet being very open and very grounded. Okay. So now you have a little feedback from the ground up through your feet. So the biggest part of our weight is traveling right down into the sitting bones, and the chair's taking that weight. And then a secondary little bit of support comes up through the feet, which is really nice. And just go ahead and rest there for a moment. Do less. So I'm asking you to kind of do a paradoxical thing, because I'm asking you to put less effort into it, but we're putting more thought into direction. And the direction is both weight of the skeleton traveling down to the chair and then legs away and into the feet as part of that grounding. But at the same time, we're directing up and we're thinking up. So one of our little taglines for Alexandra is think up. And you have this feeling that the head is kind of opening into the space above itself and taking the spine with it. And that's what gives you this really lovely sense of buoyancy in your spine. So it's a movability or a lightness or a buoyancy that's available in the spine. Now we're going to do a little experiment of moving. I'm going to have you let your eyes look over to the right. I'll do the left so you can mirror. So you're going to the right and your head is going to move to the right, and you're going to let your spine turn, and you're going to put your hand down on your chair, your right hand on the chair, and you're going to put your left hand on the outside of your thigh and keep thinking up. Don't come too far. We're not doing a big exercise here, but we're thinking about mobility in the spine. And now take a nice easy breath. This is almost a yoga pose, and come back to center. The twist pose. And we're going to do the same thing, looking to the left and looking over here. So and then come back to center. So what you just did is you allowed each of these vertebrae to move a little bit, right? This is your transverse. It's called transverse movement of each of the vertebrae. So each of them are doing a little bit of work, so one vertebrae doesn't have to do everything. One of the mistakes that we make in movement is we kind of tighten everything down and then just try to move from the waist or from the neck. So the back of your neck, the bottom of your neck, you can feel a bone down here. That is your seventh cervical vertebrae. It's the lowest vertebrae that you have in your cervical spine. That vertebrae, that between that one and the first thoracic vertebrae, are very movable. They're very flexible. And we can get ourselves in trouble because of that. Because what happens is, like, we're going to a door, and to open the door, and then we get there before we get there, we're trying to pull ourselves forward instead of bringing your legs, bringing your whole body to the place where your hand could reach the doorknob. We're kind of lurching forward in that area because we have more flexibility there. So you want to retrain yourself is what you want to do to keep I'm going to call it the alignment right now, but it's mostly to keep the sense that your spine is working as a unit of length and that we're not trying to break at the bottom of the neck or break at the lower back. Okay, that's some of the reasons why we end up having a lot of back pain or neck pain, because we're breaking at the places where there's a lot of flexibility. Now, this gets into why I was talking about the psoas muscle as a support muscle for the pelvis last week. And that is that because this part of the spine is so flexible, we think of our spine ending here, right? And that the leg starts here, but the leg doesn't start here. This is the top of the pelvis. The leg starts here. That's where the leg comes in. The leg comes in on the front of the pelvis. There's your pubic symphysis, your pubic bone. And then you see that the leg, the ball of the femur, it goes in there. So we want to make sure that we've mapped it properly and not think that the joint is up here. Okay, so it's really, really helpful to think about the pelvis having a lot of, like it's heavy. It has a lot of weight. Yeah. Okay, so then one more place I want to get to while we're still just kind of tuning into the body. I want you to bring your hands, your fingers on the front, but your thumbs kind of on the back of your shoulder girdle, and just move that shoulder girdle a little bit on the ribs. Yeah, so I'm keeping my spine fairly in the same place, but thinking of one of my Alexander teachers used to put hangers on us, literal hangers, those little aluminum hangers with the points there and the little, thing that goes on in front of you. And we would walk around the room with these hangers on. It was really funny, but it was such a great image because it makes us realize that our shoulder girdle rests on the rib cage. It rests here. It rests on this top rib. So you want to, instead of pulling down in the shoulder girdle, you want to think of widening this collarbone out. And so we don't want to pull it up. That would make a V. And we don't want to push down all these muscles, which can also be a huge muscle tension pattern that ends up causing a lot of back pain. We want to free up our shoulder girdle so that it's there, it's resting on the rib. The only thing it's resting on is that rib, but it's also widening. And just to body map your shoulder girdle, there's only two bones. It's the collarbone in the front that widens, and it's a more complicated shoulder blade in the back, because if you reached back there, you could feel the edge. That's called the spine of the scapula. And that spine of the scapula it's the widest part of your body, unless you happen to have really wide hips. Some women do, but it's very wide, and our ribs are pretty little in there, right? The shape of my ribs are like this in the rib cage, and this one. So we want to think about the shoulders resting and then being able to move our arms from the shoulder joint. So we don't have to recruit other muscles like the deltoid muscles, or even a lot of people will do things, like they'll lift the whole thing up. And you can see how that interferes with your real axial skeleton, which is only head, spine, and pelvis, right? I mean, you could include your ribs too, but that's why I use this model a lot, because that's the axial skeleton and the head on top of that. Okay. So, by the way, just as a little caveat to this, there's a muscle in here that can get really sore and tight and pull down on you. And that is one of the reasons why we collapse in the front, because it's called the pectoral minor muscle. It's attached onto the shoulder blade and it pulls down, and then the legs pull in and the body collapses and the head presses back and down. I mean, the whole series of problems come just because this muscle's tight. So you want to really open up this whole area and get the shoulder blades, to rest more accurately down the back. So I've been talking a lot so far, so let's just close our eyes and see. I've brought you into a real skeletal thinking for the moment. we know we need our muscles to support us, the back support for sure, and to move our bones, but there's a lot that the skeleton can do on its own. And you just take a moment and feel your volume I like to think of like a tree trunk, so that it's very grounded into the chair. It's very round, like a beautiful redwood tree, and it's got length, right? So it's got width and length and depth. And then you're finding that easy head balance on the top of the spine. Okay, so that's where we are. And now go ahead and open your eyes again. I'll move my chair back a little bit. We're going to get up next. So in order to get up, I hope you're still on the front of your chair. If not, come on back to the front of the chair. You want to think about the back of the legs lengthening towards the knees as well as the front of the legs. And you want to bring your feet a comfortable distance apart, so they're not too close together. When they're widening, you could go wider even if you want to. But the one mechanical thing that I suggest is to bring your heels a little closer to the chair. And you may feel in this position that your heels are off the ground. That's fine. Because I will guarantee you, as soon as you bring your body over, in other words, bring your head over your feet, the sitting bones are going to start to come up off the chair and the heels are going to go down. So that's something that happens automatically that you don't have to make happen. It's nice to pay attention to it, but you don't have to make it happen. So what we're going to do, of course, is go back to the free neck, giving yourself an opportunity to feel head balance. And you can even look slightly down, not all the way down to the floor, but look, lower your eyes so you're going to see where you're going, which is a good thing to do when you get out of a chair. And then you're simply going to think up and out. You're going to continue that up thought as you lean forward. So we're freeing the hip joint. We're leaving the legs where they are. And then you come to this rather awkward moment. This is what I call seated monkey, because we're nowhere, right? We're not in our legs yet, but we're kind of off the chair. The sitting bones should be off the chair by now. And then continue to let your head lead your spine forward, and then send your heels into the ground. You should be able to get right back up. Beautiful. Yeah, you did that great. Okay, so I'm going to change my view. You don't have to change the view, but I want you to see me on my silhouette for what we're going to do next. So you're going to just take a wide-ish stance, not too wide, not too narrow, and let your toes toe out just a little bit. And now there's something that we need to remind ourselves of. So we're gonna practice monkey. We're gonna practice the position of mechanical advantage. And for when we do that, we have to keep our knees over our toes, our second toe. Keep in your mind's eye, think, when I start to bend, I'm not going to let my knees buckle. I'm going to keep them over my second toe. And that makes the inner thigh muscles maybe have to work if you're not used to it. If you're more used to kind of tightening on the inner legs. So we're just there. Bring your hands up to the hip bone that you can feel. That's not your hip joint, but I'm just giving you that as a marker there. And we're reminding the pelvis that it's part of the torso. And now bring one hand in the front and one hand in the back, all the way down to the bottom part of your sacrum. Almost to you can even take your knuckle in there and kind of dig in there, and you feel the top of the tailbone. But the front is lengthening up, not tightening in. it's lengthening up because it's following the lead of the head up. And then you can bring your hands to your sides. And you're going to, now we're going to break this movement into two parts. I think I did this in one of my classes. So the movement of bending means that the hips have to go back and the knees have to go forward. And we have to stay over our ankles. But we're going to break it into two parts today. So what we're going to do is soften your knees a little bit, but don't bend them very much. And then you're going to just teeter-totter over, not too far. So now my sitting bones are sticking out. You should feel your butt sticking out. It's not very ladylike. It's probably the reason why we do this, right? So you're sticking your butt out. And now, second to that, let your knees start to float over your second toes. And you'll find yourself in monkey, dynamic bending. Okay? So we're active in our joints. We're active in our hip joint, our knee joint, and our ankle joints. We're not over our toes and we're not over our heels. We're right in that nice place at the ankle joint. And then the other thing that I would say is going back to that shoulder, don't let this happen. So we want to keep the shoulders nice and wide. And we're practicing this position. It's not something that we're that used to. And you can lower yourself in space, and you can lift, and you can lower, and you can lift, and you can breathe, right? And you could probably move around, right? Ape-like. So, and then come back to standing for a break. So this is very meticulous, what we're doing, and it's very intentional with our thinking. So one of the things that we're doing in Alexander technique is we're activating thought in direction, and with a certain amount of accuracy. So there's a particular place where your head is nodding on the top of the spine. There's a particular place that you're moving from in order to go into monkey. So this movement is the same movement that we would want if you're going to come over and pick something up, right? As opposed to, as we said before, lurching for it, because the neck is going to get real, because of that flexibility there, it's going to get really excited to, lead the way. And this enacts actually one of the principles of the Alexander technique, which we call the means whereby the end will be gained. This is very flowery language that comes right out of F.M. Alexander himself. That his whole point was the mind is so quick that it'll do the activity and you'll forget about your body. So we want to become that embodied. We want to come back to our bodies to be able to enact any activity with more awareness that we're doing. Okay, so let's try it one more time. You're going to take your wide stance. You're going to look at your feet. You're going to toe out just a little bit with the knowledge that when you start to bend, you want to maintain the knee over the second toe. Then we're going to bring our hands just to give yourself a little bit of tactile aid here. See my fingers all the way down there at the hip joint. And we're going to be able to teeter-totter the torso and maintain that head direction. And then get your knees more bending. Okay. And then leading with the head to come back up. We're always leading with the head. We're asking the head to lead the spine into length. In movement, and then even when you're resting, you're not going to collapse down. So my teacher, Judy Leibowitz, used to define the Alexander technique as the ability to maintain the poise of the head and the total lengthening of the spine in movement and at rest. And it's a really simple definition, but in real life, in activity, it's not so easy to accomplish. So, so that's our plan. Now I want to give you one more thing, a different way to get into monkey, and then we'll come back to sitting and I'll answer some questions that might have come up today, okay? So we're going to put ourselves back in that wide stance, toeing out a little bit. This time, we're going to do it with the knees. It shows better on the side. We're not going to pivot. We're not going to bend over. We're going to just float the knees over the toes and come down in space. Take a little moment for yourself to breathe. Reenact head forward and up to lead over hips and allow those hips to swing back. So we're activating the pelvis as part of torso. Do you see that? So I broke it into 2 movements instead of 1, just by coming down straight and then moving over that joint. So, and then come back to standing. And I'll bring my chair. Okay. So I'm just trying to see how I can demonstrate. I think I'll do it on this other one. I do have a femur bone somewhere. I don't know where it is. So what you're doing, this is really helpful to think about. So if this is my leg, my leg, the head of the femur goes into the acetabulum. Now he's facing this way. So there's the tailbone, there's the sitting bone. The leg is coming in here. When you start to go into monkey, can you see you're going up and over that leg? You're literally taking the torso up and over the leg, but the pelvis is staying with the rest of the spine. What we often do is collapse down. This part of it kind of tightens down into the legs pull up and the pelvis will rock into the legs. And that's back to what I was talking about in the beginning of the class tonight, that we think of our legs starting here, of our torso ending here. So of course the pelvis is going to get pulled down into the leg. And unfortunately, it drags your torso down with it. And that's where we get that classic head back and down that Alexander was doing when he was speaking on stage, but it's that action that we want to avoid, because it shortens everything and pulls down on the body, and usually the legs get tight. So everything goes in the opposite direction as what we're wanting to do, which is to feel this beautiful expansion in the body. Okay, so let's open it up for some questions, and then we can continue from there, maybe do another process.
Diane, I could feel my lower back stretching as I was doing that, which felt good.
Beautiful, yeah.
Also, I wanted to ask you, I don't remember if it was you or someone else talked about the plumb line of where the center of the body is from the side coming down, and that was it the front of the neck is in front of the line and the back of the spine is behind it.
Yeah, that was me. I brought
okay.
I can bring the chart back. You want to see the chart?
Yes. I thought that
Let
was
me go get the chart.
Interesting.
Yeah, this made so much sense of the technique when I first learned this. So
yeah,
we're gonna look at the middle skeleton. one right in the middle. And I call that the plumb line. You could call that the center of gravity line, whatever word you like for it. But notice that, first of all, let's just look where the spine is in relationship to that line. Yeah, it's almost the whole spine is in back of it, except a little part, tiny little part in the cervical spine, the neck bones, and a little bit more in the lumbar spine is in front, but almost the whole spine is in back. And the gravity line is going right through the center, right where the head rests on the top of the spine, which is very interesting. And then when you get down to the legs, let's look at where the femur bone is in relationship to the, and you can see that almost the entire went, well, right through the ball and socket, that's at the top. A little bit of the femur bone is behind it, but then almost the rest of the shaft is in front. And so when an Alexander technique teacher gives the cue to soften your knees, it's to put your femur bone back in this position. And then in the shin bone, the tibia, it's basically going right through the tibia into the ankle. And then it spreads out across the foot. So some of, the balance of the foot is right over the ankle joint. I'm glad you brought that back up, because that's really the template or the science behind, why it works so well. That's how we're designed. We're designed for movement that way. And anything outside of that, it distorts it. And we actually then have to use our muscular envelope to try to make sure that we don't fall. And, to repeat that thought that I spoke of last week, that we're hardwired not to let our heads fall. And, it's profound when you think about it, how we're hardwired, geared, like your body is not going to let you fall. The stretch reflex will take over, and it's sensitive to too much stretch, if that makes sense. So if you're too far forward on your toes, all the muscles in the back contract to pull you back. And if you're too far back, you're almost ready to fall backwards. All these muscles in the front, in the quads, in the abs, they'll contract automatically to pull you forward. Oh, we have a really pretty violet room in Bonnie's room. I don't know how that happened.
I have a question.
Sure.
I have a habit where if I'm like on my phone or on the computer, I will put my hand there and then put my head in it. And it's like pulling my head down into my hand.
Mhm.
How do I stop doing that
that.
habit?
Yeah. Well, number one, we have an elbow joint, right? So, bring your hand to your ear as opposed to bringing yourself down to your hand. That would be one really cool way to do it. And then make yourself comfortable. So what does that look like? Well, if you're standing waiting in line, maybe you'll want to take a little wider stance, remind yourself that you've got head balance, breathe a few deep breaths in and out, and then use your elbow to bring your hand up. If you're sitting, it's a little easier because you can take that moment to rest, right? I would come all the way back to the back of my chair because I don't need to be like ready to get up out of a chair, if I'm on the telephone. So I would just take a moment to come back to the back of the chair. If I have a pillow back there, all the better. Pause. Anybody that took, all these workshops was really into that beautiful pause, right? That's our moment to not do anything. And then you're listening to the phone ring. Don't go for it. Just let it ring a time or two and direct yourself. Stay with yourself. Stay with your breath, or notice some ease in your body, and then pick it up. And if you want to, you could cross your leg, but the idea is the same of keeping the length of the spine. So you've got the back of the chair to help. And crossing the legs is kind of a mixed bag. It helps one thing, which releases the lower back, but then it creates another problem, because if I'm sitting here with my leg crossed for a long time, I am going to slump. Because it literally puts a stretch on the lower back and invites the pelvis to rock into pelvic tilt. So as soon as we go into pelvic tilt, there starts to be a little bit of a push-pull in the rest of the torso, a little bit less easy to maintain length and width in the body. So I never propose for you to be sitting, perfectly upright all the time. You do want to use the back of the chair and relax. My chair over here, it's a really deep, cushy chair. It's my favorite chair in the house, but I'll pull my legs up and onto the chair instead of trying to sit on it, because it's very deep. So, you do these other kinds of things that are good for you. Like if I were to pull my legs up right now, I'm in flexion. I immediately go into flexion. And that's not a bad thing. That's one of the things that your body does beautifully, going into, fetal position. You could think of it like that. It goes into flexion. So there's, and then the only other thing I would say is mix it up a little bit. Don't stay in the same position. Yeah, because that's a lot of pressure. That's a lot of downward pressure, and that's what we want to avoid. But there's a lot of really comfortable ways of avoiding that. Yeah.
Diane, hello. I also have a question.
Okay.
You said to lengthen the front part of the abdominal muscles and pelvis, and you showed with your hands upwards. How did you think to lengthen upwards?
Well, it is still toning the muscles. So if you are lying on your back and pulling your belly into your spine, which is it's a cue that they give in Pilates, for example, or other exercises, that stills your pelvis. So you can do all these stretches and choreography, I call it, with your legs, right? And even dance and things. But when you're just standing, you don't need a lot of holding in there. As a matter of fact, if you hold, now you have a tension pattern. So I say, relax the abs when you're standing, get the weight to be distributed through the skeleton. And it has to go through the spine and the pelvis, and then it has to find its way into the legs. So it kind of goes from the back to the front and then down the femur bone. Then you're in a good position to think about the support, the front support you have. And that support is in the abdominal wall, but it's not like we're not crunching. We're not taking that one superficial muscle and shortening. We're thinking about all of this kind of knitting, lengthening tone, and it's following the up. It's following the head direction. So it's automatically engaging those muscles in length. They're eccentrically contracting. It's beautiful. I mean, it's a beautiful design. And then even more, when you go into this dynamic bending, you're actually toning those front muscles. just by allowing your body to have that head going up and leaning over, you're toned. Monkey is toning the muscles of the abs. It's a great ab exercise to do it properly. Does that make sense? I know it's complicated. It's very complicated, actually.
It makes sense. But with the Pilates, which you also practice, would you engage with all these or dancing movements? Would you engage more tonus in the abdominal muscle, or no, or just letting the pelvis float on the other side than the head?
I do engage the transversus muscle when I'm on my back doing Pilates. And then when you lift the head, it engages the superficial abdominal muscle. It shortens it. So
Yeah.
and also the two muscles up here in the neck. But that lifting is, it's going to strengthen muscles to do that lifting. But number one, we tend to over engage. In other words, we tighten. And we don't need to, but a little bit of engaging, like we call it shrinking the waist. Think of it like a girdle just kind of shrinking in, or drawing the belly to the spine is another cue in Pilates. And those are all great, but you're doing an exercise. In real life, when you're walking, in real life, that is real life. But when you're walking, you don't need to engage your abs. You don't need to tighten your abs in order to walk. They're already engaging in length because you're directing up. If you were slumping down, you wouldn't be engaging those muscles. But we're thinking neck free, to let the head go forward and up, to let the torso lengthen and widen, to let the legs release away. Those are the Alexander directions. And that's what we're doing when we're walking.
Talking about the abdominal, what about the gluteus?
The
The glutes during walking, yeah. Some
So,
books say to tighten it, and some books say no.
yeah. So the gluteus muscles are going to activate when you're walking up hills, when you're walking upstairs a little bit, but you don't want to make them contract. You just need them. You need them for jumping. Animals need them for pouncing on their prey. So that's why they have these big haunches, right? But we make the mistake of engaging our gluteus muscles when we're standing. You don't want to engage them when you're standing still, especially still. When you're walking, something has to balance you, but the release of I talked about this quite a bit in my Art of Walking thing, but so we've got all this up going, which we've reviewed today, and then your buttocks muscle is actually releasing, and the hamstring muscle is releasing to let that movement take place.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're standing, if I'm tightening my butt, I'm automatically going to start tightening my quads. And then I'm going to walk stiffly. I have to, because I'm engaging those muscles too much. Right? What else can I say about that? And then remember, those of you who were in the class on the pelvis, take root to fly. I was talking a lot about the pelvis and the legs being grounded, but the psoas muscle is meant to not be contracted overly. You have to contract the muscle in order to bring it's a hip flexor. So you have to, you're flexing the body over the legs. And then when you finish, you have to let it go. Otherwise, the pelvis is pulled forward. And then that creates a not great condition. And it's the same condition as when you're body mapping your spine to end here, because the pelvis is getting pulled forward and all these abdominals are not activated. Now you're in a position where you're not using your abdominals enough because you've gotten so tight in all these back muscles by tilting the pelvis forward that it just dumps. I'm a very good model for that. That's how I was when I started Alexander technique. And that's why I started it. My pelvis is like that. You'll see people that are kind of like, you know, they call it ducktailed, I think, you know, where you're just like everything's all shortened in the back.
Forward.
This is all dumped. That's because your muscle, your psoas muscle is contracted, overly contracted. It hasn't let go. So the best way to relax the psoas muscle is to be on your back with one leg lengthened and the other knee bent. And then you're going to put your third finger into the belly button, and then you can bring your another finger down to the hip joint. And you think that line there from the hip joint to the belly button, way deep, is what you're relaxing. And then you slowly move your leg down and straighten it. And it will put your psoas muscle on a stretch. So but you want to do it really slow because it's like a gentle, slow lengthening of the leg. And that you can almost feel it. Sometimes you can even palpate it, depending on your body. If you don't have a lot of extra weight in your belly, you can feel the psoas muscle getting a stretch. I learned that from a massage therapist, not an Alexander teacher.
Purple hangings in the back of Bonnie's thing. She would see my shirt or the sunset.
Are you talking to me? I think she was talking to someone else. All right. Any other questions? It's almost 6:30, so we just have a little bit more time. One last question.
I have a
Go ahead,
couple of
Lily.
questions.
Yeah.
One, I really appreciate you doing that, and I appreciate the whole thing. I mean, it is very generous with your time and your effort, and you have a million of things to do.
Oh, yeah. Well, my pleasure. And I just wanted to, give people another opportunity to go a little bit deeper and ask some questions, now that the summit is over. And you have my email address or my website. My website is called bodymindbalance.net. And you can always contact me. I actually recommend.
Very generous.
Well, I recommend signing up, opting into my website, because I do, I announce trainings that I do. And I do a lot of free stuff. I actually have a coaching business also, wellness and life coaching. And sometimes I'll do fun things, like I got on a roll this summer of doing trainings on decluttering. And how that aligns with the non-doing concept of the Alexander technique. So I can get on some little passion projects of my own. And so that's what I was doing this summer. And yeah, I would love to keep in touch with you guys, and, feel free to, actually, let me put my email in the chat. And if you have any questions.
And the other question is, of course, my introduction to the Alexander technique is the constructive rest. And then my question comes here is, when I'm sleeping, I'm trying to put the pillow underneath my occipital and leave my neck free between the pillow and the mattress.
Oh, good.
That is the way, or people put it underneath the shoulder or something under the neck to support the neck when I'm sleeping. I'm always struggling with that.
Yeah, that's great. So yeah, in the constructive rest, we want to feel the balance of the head on the platform underneath it, And then just think of letting go and widening in skull. I
Mhm.
always like to say that the head doesn't need the books, the neck needs the books. Because the head is very round and solid, and it could just be placed anywhere. But if you're on your back and you're letting your head pull down, that's going to hurt the neck. So we put books underneath it to free the neck,
All right.
to
So
help with
that's,
the neck.
I'm talking about the sleeping position when I'm lying down on my back,
Okay.
sleeping in bed at
Yeah.
night. All right. To put the pillow underneath only the occipital part, or
Mhm.
put the pillow under my neck, put the pillow under my shoulder. I'm always struggling with that.
That's that I could do a whole hour just on how to use pillows, by the way.
Oh, great. Okay, I can sign for this hour.
Wait. Wait, I didn't finish my chat. Just a minute. I'm putting my email address down there. Okay, so let's keep in touch, everyone. And
Sure.
you know, we have monthly Alexander classes for $10 that, and I happen to be doing the one in February. So that's February 19th. If you want to come back, it'll
Sure.
cost you though. And
That's okay.
that money
Absolutely.
goes to ATTGP. Yeah.
Very generous from you too. Yeah.
Mhm.
Very generous for the cause. That's great.
Yeah, you know, our mission actually was very connected to outreach. When we created that organization, twofold, you know, for people to get private clients and then also outreach to share what this work is. So there's that aspect of it. That's why we do the summits. Yeah.
I have one quick question.
Okay.
For your like private coaching, do you ever, I know you're not like I don't think you are a psychologist or that, but I'm sure like body work is helpful for like the emotional stuff. But like,
Mhm.
would you ever work with somebody or deal with somebody who is having like a lot of anger, and like how to work through that? Or I don't know exactly.
Yeah.
Are you, what are
I
your thoughts?
wouldn't, yes, I do. And depression and all these other, you know, emotional things that everybody, you know, potentially has. But I would still do it through the Alexander. And, you know, that's when I'm not when I'm coaching, but when I'm doing the Alexander technique, because there's so much release that happens. And also a sense of comfort and being heard, and you know, like there's a lot that goes into we can't separate the mind from the body and the emotions from the body. And very often the doorway into the emotions is through the body. So whether that's dance or, you know, something like mind body technique, like Alexander technique, Feldenkrais, there's not too many techniques that are not body work. And Alexander's definitely a mind body technique. Yeah.
Thank
So
you very much.
really nice question. Yeah. All right, everyone. Thank you for coming, and I'll see you again. Okay, be
Thank
in
you.
touch.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much.
Thank you.
Bye bye. Great. Okay,
Good
bye.
night.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
Yeah.
Very kind.
You again.